General Cole Armstrong's jaw was a tight knot of frustration. Before the president and the Joint Chiefs, he laid out his comprehensive strategy for the Havenport disaster relief, a plan born from weeks of sleepless analysis. He had barely cleared his first point when a smooth, cultured voice sliced through his presentation. Secretary of State Miles Davenport interjected, his tone deceptively mild, stating that the general's approach was fundamentally flawed. Cole tried to ignore him, continuing to speak about the seasonal flash floods that plagued the region. Miles, however, deliberately raised his voice, a cascade of quotes from obscure economists and long-dead philosophers designed to drown out Cole's pragmatic military briefing. Cole knew with a burning certainty that none of those historical figures had ever formulated a policy on federal levee construction. He bit down hard, forcing himself to remain silent. Arguing with Miles was a fool's errand. He had never once won a battle of wits against that razor-sharp tongue. He told himself to endure it. Just endure. But then Miles delivered the final blow, suggesting with a condescending smile that while General Armstrong possessed a formidable mind, it appeared to have a blind spot the size of the Mississippi Delta when it came to civil engineering. That was it. Cole's control shattered. He shot up, his hand jabbing the air in Miles's direction, the man's name a mangled stutter on his lips.
Miles.
Miles simply smiled, rising with fluid grace and offering his own monogrammed pocket square. He asked if the general needed to cry it out. A wave of stifled laughter rippled through Miles's allies in the room. Cole swatted the silk away, the fabric fluttering in the air. He spat two words through clenched teeth, his voice a low growl of pure disgust. Utterly shameless. Miles caught the square an inch from the floor, his movements deft and precise. He lovingly smoothed the wrinkles from the fabric before tucking it away and turning to the president. He bowed slightly and announced that Secretary Shameless was now taking his leave. On his way out, he threw a provocative, almost beautiful smile over his shoulder at Cole. The general felt the floor tilt beneath him. He wanted to lie down right there. The young president hurried down from his seat, personally helping him into a chair, reassuring him that a great man like himself shouldn't heed the judgment of others. Moved, Cole straightened up and asked if that meant the president was ready to approve his initiative. The president had the grace to look embarrassed as he scratched his head and admitted that he found Secretary Davenport's arguments rather compelling. Miles Davenport. Cole swore he would make him pay. Just as he was walking out of the West Wing, an alert buzzed on Cole's phone. The Havenport contract had been awarded to Lucas Vance. Vance, a man from Miles's inner circle, a man whose name was synonymous with kickbacks and shoddy construction. It was Vance's corner cutting that had turned Havenport into a perpetual disaster zone. Cole's painstaking research, his plan, it was all for nothing. It had all been a performance to pave the way for Vance. Rage, pure and hot, flooded him. He started running. Sure enough, there was Miles, strolling leisurely down the avenue as if he didn't have a care in the world. Cole cut him off, his voice a low command for him to stop. Miles blinked, his expression one of amused surprise. He remarked on how Cole must have missed him, given how little time had passed. To keep his voice steady, Cole forced the fury down and demanded to know if Miles was truly ignorant of Vance's corrupt history. Miles feigned an innocent shock, raising a perfectly sculpted eyebrow and murmuring something about the impropriety of discussing such matters in public. Cole's hands clenched into fists as he was told to answer him. Miles, ever the performer, held up his hands in a gesture of surrender and admitted, of course, that he knew. Cole fought the overwhelming urge to smash his fist into that smug face. He stammered, trying to ask why Miles would let it happen. A soft, infuriating chuckle escaped Miles's lips. He launched into one of his signature tirades, a dizzying monologue weaving in obscure political theories that always seemed to mesmerize their impressionable young president. Cole knew he couldn't win the argument, but he couldn't stand the sound either, that endless stream of condescending reason flowing from those thin, red lips. He felt like a pressure cooker about to blow. He clapped his hands over his ears, summoning his battlefield composure, and managed to force out one clear, steady sentence. He warned Miles that if he uttered one more syllable, he would personally shut his mouth for him. Suddenly, there was silence. Cole wondered if he had actually managed to shock him. Then Miles raised a silver pen to cover his mouth, leaving only his eyes visible. They were luminous and knowing, and they seemed to hold Cole in place with an intensity that made his heart lurch. Miles stepped closer. Cole's instinct screamed at him to retreat, but his pride held him fast, his spine ramrod straight. Miles leaned in, his voice a breath against Cole's ear, asking him to specify what, exactly, he planned on using. The question hung in the air. What did he mean? Cole's mind went blank. What had he just threatened? Was Miles mocking him, or had his own mind conjured a more scandalous interpretation? He couldn't move, couldn't speak, terrified that any response would betray the chaos in his own thoughts. Miles chuckled softly, saying it was no matter. Whatever the general intended, he would eagerly await it. He only feared, he added with a meaningful pause, that the general might not have the stamina for it. His confrontation with Miles still burning in his mind, Cole returned home to find another problem waiting. An invitation. Senator Albert Vance, the president's influential older brother, was hosting his birthday party, and Cole was on the guest list. This was strange. He and the senator had never been close. Ordinarily, a party was just a party, but Senator Vance was a man of extravagant and often reckless tastes. The venue was the Gilded Cage, an exclusive underground club where Washington's elite indulged in activities the press would have a field day with. Federal officials were explicitly forbidden from frequenting such establishments, but the president, who had been raised by his older brother, always turned a blind eye. Cole had no desire to go. He valued his clean record. He held the embossed invitation, wrestling with his conscience, before finally throwing it down and ordering his driver to get the car. Senator Vance had no official power, but he openly despised his relative, Lucas Vance. Perhaps, if the senator was in a good mood, Cole could persuade him to speak to the president about changing contractors. The air in the Gilded Cage was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and aged whiskey. Cole felt deeply uncomfortable as the senator, in a show of magnanimous hospitality, assigned 2 beautiful companions to each of his guests. Cole, unable to refuse without causing a scene, gave the women the bizarre task of shelling 2,000 pistachios each. He was scanning the room, looking for an opportunity to speak to the senator alone, when a commotion erupted near the entrance. The club manager's panicked voice cut through the music, protesting that the guest of honor was Senator Vance himself. Then another voice, sharp and cold, announced that they were there on federal orders to arrest Senator Vance for violating ethics laws. The voice was so chillingly familiar that Cole felt a weakness in his knees. He didn't understand why Miles Davenport would be here. This wasn't his jurisdiction. And Miles was famously slick, a man who never made enemies unnecessarily. He had long tried to get into Senator Vance's good graces, despite the senator's open disdain for him. This raid seemed like a declaration of war. But why tonight of all nights? Cole's head whipped around. Miles was tall enough that his head was visible above the panicked crowd. His eyes, usually so full of soft amusement, were now as cold and hard as ice. And in that instant, as if guided by an unseen force, Miles's gaze shifted and locked directly onto his. Felt as if something in Cole's mind cracked. He turned and fled. Behind him, he heard Miles's cold laugh, followed by an order to seal every exit. No one was leaving. The main room of the club emptied out until the only sound was the clinking of ice in abandoned glasses. Then, a slow, familiar footstep approached. Cole hid behind a heavy velvet curtain, holding his breath. The click of a bolt sliding into place echoed in the sudden silence. The footsteps stopped in the center of the room. Miles's voice, devoid of any warmth, called his full name. Cole Armstrong. Come out. Cole stayed put. Only an idiot would walk into that. The curtain was flush against the wall. It was possible Miles wouldn't realize someone could hide behind it. He might just give up and leave. But that hope evaporated as a pair of hands shot through the curtain, brandishing a pair of gleaming handcuffs. They snapped shut around his wrists with brutal efficiency. He was yanked from his hiding place and slammed back against the wall. The man moved like a ghost. Miles held the chain connecting the cuffs, a grim smile playing on his lips. He remarked on how far Cole had fallen to be caught in a place like this. Cole's first instinct was to knock him out and run, but Miles was alone and seemed willing to talk. Perhaps there was a chance to explain. Besides, he didn't really want to hurt him. Miles's slender frame looked like it would break with a single punch. He stated seriously that he hadn't done anything wrong. Miles scoffed, clearly disbelieving. Cole patiently explained that while the senator had assigned companions to him, he had only put them to work shelling pistachios. He hadn't so much as touched their sleeves. At this, a flicker of something unreadable passed through Miles's eyes. He asked if that was really true. Cole nodded earnestly. A slow smile returned to Miles's face. He pointed out that by merely setting foot in the establishment, the general was already guilty. It was then that Cole understood. The truth didn't matter. This was an opportunity for Miles to ruin him. A slow burn of anger started deep in his gut. He tried one last time, clinging to a sliver of hope. He argued that the law forbade fraternizing, and he hadn't fraternized. Miles cleared his throat and asked if the general wished to debate the precise legal definition of the term, offering to start with its etymological roots in ancient Rome. That was it. The man was toying with him again. If he wanted a fight, Cole would give him one. He channeled all his strength into his arms and pulled. And pulled. Nothing. The cuffs didn't budge. What were these things made of? With his last resort thwarted by some impossibly strong piece of metal, the simmering anger erupted. He could feel a stutter coming on. Miles's lips curved, but he kept talking, his voice a relentless, condescending drone. Cole stared at those lips, moving up and down, and felt an overwhelming primal urge to make them stop. With his hands bound, he rose on his toes, leaned forward, and silenced them the only way he could. Miles's words died in his throat. When Cole came to his senses, the world had shifted. He was on a plush sofa, pinned beneath Miles's body, his hands held firmly above his head. The miraculous handcuffs had been removed and tossed aside. Seizing the opportunity, he struggled with all his might. He couldn't move. When had Miles gotten so strong? He remembered their time at the academy together. Cole hated academics, and Miles loathed physical training. Cole would let him copy his essays, and in return, he'd teach Miles a few flashy moves to pass his physical exams. Miles loved to debate, and his tendency to bend the truth often got him into fights. He'd shout Cole's name, and Cole would always be there to bail him out. He never imagined that one day he would be so utterly overpowered by him. It was a humiliation beyond words. Miles just smiled, telling him to calm down, reminding him that he had warned him about this. "Warned me about what?" Cole snarled, feeling one step away from a complete meltdown. Miles. You get?" Miles released one of his hands. A spark of hope ignited in Cole. He gathered all his strength for one final push, but it resulted in nothing more than a pathetic wriggle on the sofa. Even with one hand, he was no match. He couldn't believe it. In his panic, the final two words he wanted to scream, "Get off," remained trapped in his throat. Miles, meanwhile, calmly reached into his jacket pocket and retrieved his monogrammed silk square. He folded it neatly, his movements slow and deliberate, and brought it toward Cole's mouth. Cole's eyes widened in disbelief. Miles's voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. "Hush, Cole," he murmured. "If speaking is so difficult, perhaps it's better not to speak at all." It was nearly dawn when Cole stumbled home, disheveled and deeply shaken. Miles hadn't arrested him. He had said he believed Cole was a man of integrity. To hell with his belief, Cole thought bitterly. Why couldn't he have believed that earlier? He showered, changed, and collapsed into bed, exhausted but unable to sleep. Something about Miles was wrong. At the academy, he'd avoided the gym like the plague, yet somewhere along the way he had secretly become strong. His sudden raid on Senator Vance was out of character. And his behavior toward Cole tonight, nothing made sense. He tossed and turned, replaying every moment until the sun began to rise. Then it hit him. He shot up in bed. Miles Davenport, you magnificent, scheming bastard. Within 3 days, Miles had quietly resolved the Senator Vance incident. The senator was demoted in rank and stripped of some committee chairmanships, while the other guests received fines. On the 4th morning, news broke that Miles Davenport had been publicly reprimanded for overstepping his authority by entering the West Wing with his left foot first. A ridiculous, archaic rule and docked a month's pay. Cole laughed until his sides hurt. Miles had played himself, handing Cole the perfect opportunity on a silver platter. He immediately requested a meeting with the president and, this time, successfully secured control of the Havenport project. Lucas Vance had already left for the site, so Cole rode hard, catching up to his motorcade 5 miles outside D.C. Vance wished him good luck with a sneer, hoping he wouldn't regret his ambition. Cole ignored him and was about to head out when a voice called from the direction of the city, telling the general to wait. It was Miles's personal security detail. Cole's heart sank. He had hoped to avoid the man for a while. The man was an inescapable specter in his life. Couldn't he take a break, even with a formal reprimand to nurse? The Blacktown car pulled up, and the driver informed him that Secretary Davenport requested his presence inside. Cole scoffed at the idea of getting into that car, remarking that it was easier to get in than out. Just then, the tinted window rolled down. Miles sat in the shadows, his expression unreadable. His voice was weak when he pointed out that Cole was acting on presidential orders. It wasn't as if he could be kidnapped. Cole thought he was more than capable of it. The memory of that night made him turn his head away. He told him to either get out and talk or he was leaving. Miles's voice held a note of genuine complaint as he said he was injured and couldn't possibly move. Fine. Cole dismounted, walked to the car, drew the ceremonial sword he wore with his dress uniform, and with one clean stroke, sliced the vehicle's convertible roof in half. Sunlight flooded the car's interior. Miles, who had been slumped over, flinched at the sudden light. He looked up, stunned for a moment, and then he laughed. In the bright light, Cole could see that his face was indeed pale. The urge to mock him vanished. He just told him to say what he had to say. Miles used his old academy nickname, his voice coaxing. Cole, he began, adopting a tone of sincere advice. It's not too late to back out. I can smooth things over with the president for you. Any trace of sympathy Cole might have felt evaporated. He asked coldly why he would back out. Miles scoffed, asking if he really thought this project was some kind of prize. Cole retorted that his man, Lucas Vance, certainly seemed to think so. Miles shook his head. Surprise for him. For you, it's a trap. Cole assumed he was being insulted again and demanded to know why. Because you actually want to fix it. The words struck a chord deep within him. Back at the academy, he had considered Miles his closest confidant. They shared a vision of a stronger, cleaner nation. They understood each other's ambitions. But after graduation, their paths diverged dramatically. Cole spent nearly 6 years in active combat zones, earning his stars through blood and sacrifice. Miles, meanwhile, navigated the treacherous currents of Washington, building alliances, charming the new president, and accumulating power. When Cole returned from the front lines, covered in the dust and scars of war, he found that the friend he knew had transformed into a stranger. Yet now, with a single sentence, Miles had pierced through years of misunderstanding and reminded him that he was, perhaps, the only one who truly knew him. Cole stared at him and gave a short, sharp laugh. You're right. So what? "Is that not allowed, Mr. Secretary?" Miles's expression was serious. "Cole, you've been on the battlefield too long. You don't understand. The politics in this town are murkier than the river you're trying to tame." Cole's smile faded. He knew all too well, but he was determined to fix it anyway. Miles looked down, a quiet, sad smile on his face. "Of course. You always were like this." He looked back up. "In that case, I won't stop you. Be careful. And if you need anything at all, just ask." The offer was so absurd Cole couldn't help but laugh. He thanked him dryly, saying that not actively sabotaging him would be help enough. Usually, such a jab would earn him one of Miles's signature infuriating smirks. But this time, Miles didn't smile. He leaned on his aide, laboriously shifting his position. "Cole," he said, his gaze fixed on him, "is that really the kind of person you think I am?" Cole shot back. "Aren't you?" Miles braced himself on the car seat. His expression pained for a moment before he gave a bitter laugh. "General, those who walk a straight line often end up broken on the side of the road. I don't want you to go because I'm worried about you." The words stunned Cole into a moment of silence. It had been so long since he had heard any genuine kindness from him, even if he couldn't be sure it was real. He found his fingers curling into a fist, then slowly relaxing. "Miles, even if the straight path is difficult, it's the only one I'll walk." He turned away. "We're on different paths. There's nothing more to say." As he walked to his horse, he heard Miles call out behind him, his voice raspy. "So we can never walk the same path again, Cole?" He swung himself into the saddle, gripping the reins, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. He thought for a long moment. "Maybe," he said softly, and then he spurred his horse, leaving Miles behind in a cloud of dust. "Miles Davenport," he thought, "if you truly want to walk the same path, then I'll be waiting for you at the end. Don't you dare disappoint me." He saw Miles again several months later. Soon after arriving in Havenport, Cole had worked around the clock to secure funding for his revised levy plan. He had just started implementing it when news arrived from Washington. Miles had submitted a formal objection to 6 of his 7 key policy points. Cole listened to the litany of his supposed fallacies and just smiled. So much for walking the same path. It was all just another one of his pretty lies. But the earnestness in his voice that day had given him a foolish flicker of hope. Better to have it extinguished now. He picked up his pen, ready to wage a war of memos and reports. But after that initial salvo, Miles went silent. His allies, however, launched a relentless, coordinated attack on Cole's project. It was a swamp of bureaucracy and red tape. After months of fighting, Cole finally managed to get the main construction underway. One evening, returning from the riverbank, he collapsed into a chair. As an aide handed him a cup of coffee, a glint of metal flashed in his peripheral vision. His training kicked in. He disarmed the attacker with ease, shattered both his legs with a swift kick, and hauled him up by the neck. He demanded to know who had sent such an incompetent fool to kill him. The assassin, choking and in agony, gasped out a name. Secretary Davenport. Cole frowned. He was sure it was him. He threw the man to the ground and stared out the window for a long moment. He told his aide to take the man to the base brig. He wanted to have a long talk with him. The next morning, as he left the interrogation room, his aide had his car ready for the trip to the river. Cole waved him off, saying he wouldn't be going during the day for a while, only at night. When the aide looked confused, Cole smiled. He told him to spread the word that he'd been seriously injured in an assassination attempt and needed several days to recover. Then he had another thought and instructed an aide to send a secure message to Miles Davenport, inviting him for an urgent meeting. For the next few days, Cole feigned his injuries, sleeping and reviewing blueprints by day, and secretly visiting the construction site by night. Miles arrived sooner than he'd expected. As soon as he was alerted, Cole hid the blueprints and lay down, pretending to be asleep. A moment later, quiet footsteps entered the room. Miles approached the bed. He gently lifted the blanket, taking Cole's hand in his, about to check his pulse. Cole's hand shot out, snatching the long blade he kept by his bed. Before Miles could react, the cold steel was pressed against his throat. Miles froze, but his expression was one of pure relief. "You're not hurt," Cole sneered, finding it difficult to believe his act. He remarked that the secretary clearly underestimated him if he thought such a pathetic killer could succeed. Miles's eyes widened in theatrical shock. He insisted he would never dream of having him killed. He pleaded with him to put the sword down. But Cole didn't budge, pressing the blade even closer. The playful look on Miles's face vanished. "You're serious," he said, his voice flat. He looked at Cole, his brow furrowed. He surmised that Cole believed he sent the assassin, faked an injury, and lured him there. Cole's lips curled into a smirk. "Precisely." "Cole," Miles said, his tone grave, "you've misunderstood." Cole asked how he explained the assassin confessing under heavy interrogation. Miles suddenly exploded with anger. He couldn't explain it. He accused Cole of setting a trap, of putting a sword to his neck and then feigning a request for an explanation when his mind was already made up. He shouted that Cole believed a hired killer over him. After all their years, after all their history, he never thought they would reach a point of life and death. But here was Cole, holding a blade to his throat. Cole was so taken aback by his furious tirade that he instinctively pressed the blade tighter against the soft skin of his neck. He warned him not to shout at him again. Miles clamped his mouth shut, a look of profound hurt on his face. "Fine," he whispered, his gaze drifting off into the distance. "I suppose I don't want to live that much anyway. If you want to kill me, do it." He closed his eyes. A single tear traced a path down his cheek. Cole stared, then leaned in closer to be sure. It was real. He was crying. A bark of laughter escaped Cole's lips. Miles's eyes flew open, bewildered. "Miles, you're pathetic," Cole said, tossing the sword onto the floor. He told him he hadn't been fooled for a second by such a clumsy frame-up. He had gotten the full story. He held out the signed confession from the assassin. "Here, read it." Miles didn't take it. He just stared at Cole, a dangerous light glinting in his eyes. Cole, who had been feeling rather pleased with himself, suddenly felt a prickle of fear. He tried to joke, asking if he was angry. He reminded him that a man of his stature should be more magnanimous. Before he could finish, his wrist was seized in an iron grip. He was yanked forward until his face was inches from Miles's. Miles's voice was a low, furious hiss. He asked if Cole thought this was a funny joke. He demanded to know if Cole had any idea how worried he had been, hearing he was seriously injured. He had rushed there, not sleeping for 2 days, only to be met with a sword and an accusation. And now Cole thought he could just brush it all away with a casual "just kidding"? Cole found he couldn't argue. He just said he was wrong, that he was sorry. Miles's grip tightened. An apology wasn't enough. He leaned closer still, his voice dropping to a whisper. He needed compensation. The heat of his breath on Cole's cheek made him freeze. "WHWH what KK kind of CC compensation?" Hearing the stutter, Miles's anger seemed to melt away, replaced by his familiar, knowing smile. His eyes danced as he said he would have to think about it. That evening, they shared a bottle of bourbon. The clink of their glasses was a clear, sharp sound in the quiet room. It had been years since they had sat together like this, in something approaching harmony. They had the assassin to thank for it. Miles read the confession from start to finish, a wry, resigned smile on his face. The true mastermind was Lucas Vance. After Cole had taken over the Havenport project, Vance had repeatedly urged Miles to eliminate him. When Miles refused, Vance decided to take matters into his own hands. He had bribed Senator Vance, intending to use his scandalous party to frame Cole for a serious crime. Miles, getting wind of the plot at the last minute, had no choice but to raid the party and blow the whole thing up, saving Cole but incurring the wrath of both the senator and the president. The reprimand was the president's petty revenge. Vance, furious that his plan had backfired, grew to hate Cole even more. After Cole started undoing all his corrupt work in Havenport, Vance and his allies decided to force Miles's hand. They sent the assassin with two objectives: kill Cole if possible, but if not, frame Miles to cause an irreparable rift between them. Cole admitted that, looking back, the past few months, though difficult, had gone much smoother than he'd had any right to expect. He realized Miles's help had been more than just passive non-interference. Miles just smiled and said nothing. Cole raised his glass, studied him for a moment, then set it down with a thud. Miles looked up, surprised. Cole told him that while Miles was angry about his joke, he should consider that Cole had his own reasons to be angry. Miles looked even more puzzled, asking what he was angry about. Cole leaned forward, his voice serious. He was angry that Miles hadn't been honest with him, that their relationship had deteriorated to the point where he had to learn of Miles's goodwill from the confession of a hired killer. He asked him how a man as eloquent as the Secretary of State could sometimes be so frustratingly silent. Miles was quiet for a moment, then placed a hand over his heart. "False words are easy," he said softly. "The truth is hard to speak." Cole's heart gave an extra beat. He stared at Miles for a long moment, then raised his glass again. Miles mirrored the gesture, leaning forward and linking their arms in a cross-armed toast. As he brought the glass to his lips, Cole found his gaze locked with Miles's smiling eyes. "May I, Cole?" Miles asked. A thin sheen of sweat had formed where their arms touched. Cole was silent for a moment, then asked if his promise, about them walking the same path, still held. Miles answered without hesitation. "Always." "Good," Cole said. After they finished the bottle, Cole led Miles to the secure room where he kept his most sensitive files. On the desk was a small, locked briefcase. He opened it for Miles to inspect while he went to turn up the lamp. By the time he returned, Miles was halfway through the documents inside. Cole explained that he planned to present the contents to the president next month, but given that it concerned the secretary, he wanted his approval first. The briefcase contained a mountain of evidence detailing the corruption of Lucas Vance and other members of Miles's political faction. Miles returned the documents to the case, his eyes downcast. He said he trusted the general's judgment and had no objections. Cole relocked the case, smiling slightly. "Good. But I have one condition." Miles raised an eyebrow. "And that is?" He leaned in, a playful glint in his eye, and whispered, "Tonight, I want to sleep here with you." The next day, Miles returned to Washington. After seeing him off, Cole went back to the secure room, opened the briefcase, and carefully reviewed the contents. Amidst the thick stacks of paper, one thin sheet was missing. It was a small piece of paper, but it was the linchpin. Without it, the rest of the evidence was rendered circumstantial, its authenticity questionable. So it was true. Miles had helped him, yes, but when it came to sacrificing his own key allies, his loyalty had its limits. Miles, Cole thought, "You get angry when I don't trust you. But can you honestly say you deserve my trust?" He took all the documents from the case and set them on fire. It didn't matter. They were fakes he had prepared in advance, just in case Vance's people tried to steal them. On the 1st of the following month, Cole took the real evidence back to Washington and presented it to the president. The president was furious and ordered a full investigation. But the first person to be arrested was not Lucas Vance. It was Cole Armstrong. The charge was falsifying evidence and making false accusations against federal officials. The key document was missing, rendering his entire case invalid. That night, in his cell, Miles came to visit. Cole sat on the cot, his eyes closed. The footsteps stopped outside the bars. After a long silence, he heard a soft laugh. He opened his eyes and glared. Miles's smile widened. He asked if Cole thought he had stolen the evidence. Cole's silence was his answer. Who else could it be? Miles must have discovered the first set was fake and found a way to steal the real document after it had been submitted. "I swear on my life, Cole," Miles said, his voice light, "if I stole it, may I be struck by lightning." He chided him gently. He said that he had known Cole was testing him with the fake documents and had played along, taking one to warn him to be more careful. But Cole had ignored his and now blamed him for his own predicament. Then he started quoting philosophers again. Cole clamped his hands over his ears and turned to face the wall. Miles's laughter followed him as he walked away, echoing down the corridor until it disappeared. Cole stood up and kicked the cell door in frustration. As it rattled, he noticed Miles had left several containers of food outside. For 3 days he sat in that cell. Miles came every day with meals. At first, Cole refused to eat, wanting to maintain his dignity. But the prison food was inedible, and by the second day, he decided that a man could have a feud with another man, but not with a well-cooked steak. He was never called for questioning. On the 4th day, he was simply released and summoned to the president's office. Miles was already there, a self-satisfied smirk on his face. Cole ignored him. The president apologized for the 3 days of hardship. He explained that before Cole had even returned to D.C., Miles had warned him that there might be a mole in the White House who would try to steal the evidence. Miles had given him a fake copy of the key document and told him to swap it with the real one. Sure enough, the fake had been stolen the next night. The past 3 days had been a ruse to isolate and identify the spy. Now, the mole was caught, and Lucas Vance and his co-conspirators were facing even more serious charges. The president praised Cole for his service and asked what he desired as a reward. Cole ground his teeth. He had only one question, he said, and asked permission to speak freely. He wanted to know why he couldn't have been told about the plan in advance. The young president blushed slightly and glanced at Miles. He mumbled that Secretary Davenport had told him not to. The culprit himself looked utterly innocent. He explained that since the general didn't trust him, telling him beforehand might have made him suspect a double-cross. He sighed dramatically, lamenting how difficult it was to be a good person these days. Miles followed him all the way home, chattering nonstop. "Cole, honestly, you're far too sensitive. You tested me first, then you suspected me. I'm the one who should be angry, not you." Cole grabbed an apple from the fruit bowl on his table and shoved it into Miles's mouth. Miles pulled it out, grinning. "If you had just told me something useful," Cole growled, "I wouldn't have suspected you again and again." "Something useful?" Miles mused, his eyes twinkling. "My dearest Cole, in my heart, you are the—" Cole snatched the apple back and stuffed it in his mouth again. Miles removed it once more, his smile softening. "All right, no more games. I have never once broken a promise to you." "Really?" Cole sank into an armchair, letting out a long, weary breath. "Is that not so?" Miles challenged, taking the seat next to him. "Are we not, at this moment, walking the same path?" A small smile touched Cole's lips. "At the academy, we promised to clean up the whole country together. And by removing parasites like Vance," Miles countered, "are we not doing just that?" "But most of the remaining parasites are your allies," Cole pointed out. Miles grew serious. He explained patiently that cleaning up Washington wasn't a one-day job. His strategy was to align with them first, to control them, and then to dismantle their networks from the inside. He asked how else he would have known about the mole and the plan to steal the evidence. He insisted he wasn't looking for CR, but without his help, Cole might truly have been destroyed by them. His expression was unusually sincere. He said he knew Cole looked down on his methods and that he admired his courage to walk the straight path. But he believed that self-preservation was just as important as their ultimate goal. His way allowed for both. He quickly added that he wasn't trying to change him. He told Cole to keep doing things his way, and he would support him unconditionally. He just wished Cole would be a little more careful. Cole listened to the long speech in silence, his eyes never leaving Miles's face. Miles misinterpreted his silence and gave a self-deprecating laugh. He told him to go ahead and call him a coward. He wouldn't deny it. Looking at his crestfallen expression, Cole smiled. He took the apple from Miles's hand, broke it in two, and handed one half back. They touched the pieces of fruit together like glasses. To cleaning up the country, Cole said, his smile genuine. And to walking the same path. 2 months later, back in Havenport, Cole received a sudden summons for all regional project directors to return to Washington for a progress report. It was the height of the storm season. He couldn't leave. He requested a delay, but before his request could even be processed, a presidential envoy was at his door. He had no choice but to ride back, pushing his horse day and night. That evening, the president hosted a dinner at the White House. Cole had planned to give his report and leave immediately, but a direct order from the president was not to be ignored. When he arrived, he found that he seemed to be the only guest. The only others present were 2 of the president's closest aides, neither of whom had any connection to the Havenport project. He greeted the president and asked where the other directors were. The president vaguely mentioned they had been delayed. A strange feeling crept over Cole. Why were others allowed to be late, while he had been summoned with such urgency? His eyes scanned the room, passing over the 2 aides. One of them met his gaze and offered a nervous smile, making awkward small talk. But Cole saw it, a fleeting, subconscious glance toward the decorative screen in the corner of the room. A faint shimmer of light danced behind it. Cole's blood ran cold. It was an ambush. Was the president going to kill him? 10 days ago, after Vance's conviction, the president had sent him a commendation. What could have happened in 10 days to make him want Cole dead? And not arrested, but assassinated. Before he could make sense of it, the president raised his glass. The Havenport flooding is finally under control. You've done well, General. To you. Cole reached for his own glass. Mr. President, I am humbled. As he brought the glass to his lips, he froze. The color of the wine was wrong. It was poison. The president was offering him a dignified exit. If he refused, the men behind the screen would rush out. Cold sweat soaked his shirt. What should he do? Die quietly, or demand an explanation and be cut down? As he hesitated, the doors to the room were thrown open. A voice boomed, asking who would dare enter without being announced. The president saw the intruder first, and a flicker of panic crossed his face. Mr. Secretary, what are you doing here? Miles strode toward the table, smiling. He said he smelled a fine dinner and couldn't resist. The president's face hardened. He informed Miles that he was dining with General Armstrong alone and asked him to leave. His tone was cold, a stark contrast to his usual deference to Miles. Something was very wrong. The president had ordered him out, but Miles didn't move. Cole felt a surge of panic, afraid Miles would be caught in his mess. He wanted to tell him to go, but Miles spoke first. He said he had come precisely because he heard the president was hosting the general alone. He launched into a speech about Cole's years of service, his near-death experiences in battle, and his recent tireless work in Havenport. How could the president toast such a hero with such undrinkable wine? Cole knew Miles was trying to save him, which only made him more terrified that the president's anger would turn on him, too. The words to send Miles away were stuck in his throat. The president's face was beaded with sweat, but he held his ground. It's a 10-year vintage. What's undrinkable about it? Oh, a 10-year vintage? Miles mused. In that case, I must have a taste. Before Cole could react, Miles snatched the glass from his hand and drained it in one gulp. Miles! Mr. Secretary. Cole lunged for the glass, but it was already empty. Miles turned to the president and bowed slowly, his voice already raspy. Mr. President, he choked out, General Armstrong is innocent. I hope you will see the truth. The president seemed not to hear him, shouting frantically for the medics. But Miles was already collapsing. Cole caught him, his hands trembling uncontrollably. The poison was fast. A trickle of blood ran from the corner of Miles's mouth, staining Cole's uniform. Me. He couldn't form the words. Sobs racked his body. Just as he had done so many times before when he heard Cole stutter, Miles gave a faint, gentle laugh. He fumbled with his own sleeve, trying to raise it to Cole's face. "Don't cry, General," he whispered. It turned out that Lucas Vance and his cronies had made one last desperate accusation before their sentencing. Near Havenport was a key military installation where Cole had once been stationed. They claimed Cole's insistence on taking the Havenport project was a cover for colluding with the local garrison to stage a coup. The paranoid young president had sent a trusted aide to investigate and found some ambiguous, circumstantial evidence. Miles had argued that either the evidence or the aide was flawed, but the president insisted that on a matter of national security, it was better to be safe than sorry. Miles had begged for time to investigate personally, and the president had agreed. But after Miles left D.C., the president's paranoia grew. He couldn't wait. He secretly recalled Cole for the fatal dinner. But Miles, with his extensive network of informants, heard about the summons and raced back. Knowing he couldn't reason with the president, he chose the only path he saw to save Cole's life. The medics arrived in time. They saved Miles's life, but the poison had ravaged his throat. The doctor said that with extensive therapy, recovery was not entirely impossible, which sounded to Cole like a very slim chance. He silently saw the doctor out and returned to Miles's bedside. "All right, stop pretending. I know you're awake," he said wearily. A corner of Miles's mouth lifted, and his eyes fluttered open. He looked at Cole and smiled his infuriating, smug smile. Seeing it again, after everything, unleashed a storm of emotion in Cole. "What is wrong with you?" he roared. "You told me you were a coward, that self-preservation was important. You didn't hesitate for a second yesterday. Did you think I'd be grateful? I'm not. If you had died, I would have. He took a deep breath, forcing back the tears that burned his eyes. "I would have died with you." Miles smiled, pointed to himself, and then waved his hand dismissively. Then he pointed at Cole and shook his head firmly. Cole understood. He was saying that he could die, but Cole could not. He pretended not to understand. Miles, looking exhausted, reached for the pad and pen on the nightstand. Just before his fingers touched them, Cole moved them out of his reach. Miles shot him a wounded look, which quickly turned into a resigned smile. "Don't waste the government's paper," Cole said. "I'm taking you home." He moved to help Miles up. Miles looked at him questioningly and made a gesture of bowing. Cole knew he was asking about the president. "Thanks to your little stunt," Cole said, "the president isn't going to press the issue. He's young, too suspicious, too gullible. At least," he added, looking at Miles, "he has one person he can trust." Hearing this, Miles broke into a wide, happy smile and let Cole help him sit up. He helped him into the car for the ride to his residence. Miles leaned against the seat, his eyes closed. The car was quiet except for the rumble of the wheels. A deep sense of unease settled over Cole. He used to hate Miles's constant chatter, but now he feared he might be silent forever. He remembered it was time for his medication and reached into his pocket for the bottle. As he turned to wake him, he found Miles already awake, watching him with his head propped on his hand, an unmistakably mischievous look in his eyes. The melancholy that had gripped Cole vanished. He shot him a sidelong glance and tossed the pill bottle into his lap. Miles didn't take it. Instead, he grabbed Cole's hand and began to trace letters on his palm with his index finger. Cole raised an eyebrow and yanked his hand back. "No, you don't get to write," he said with a smirk. "Now you know how it feels to have something to say and not be able to say it." Miles slowly retracted his hand, his eyes fixed on Cole, a half-smile playing on his lips. A shiver went down Cole's spine, but he remembered Miles's weakened state and felt his bravado return. "What are you going to do? In your condition, what can you possibly do?" he taunted. "Come on, let's arm wrestle. My one hand against your two." Before he could finish, Miles's hand shot out and clamped both of Cole's wrists, pinning them above his head with terrifying strength. He was faking. That whole pathetic act of needing to be carried into the car, it was all an act. Rage flared in him. "You lied to me again. Let me go. Do you hear me? Let me go." The grip on his wrists tightened, and then his chin was seized. The general was like a lamb caught in the jaws of a wolf. Miles, you're mute, not deaf. I said let go.
Mileś, www.in a cccar.